graduating class of 17. Look at that. That's pretty cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
When I was 5 years old, my family fled from Bosnia at the start of the Yugoslavian Civil War. After 9 months of immigration processing, we boarded a cargo plane headed for Canada. The plane had no seats, so we sat on our suitcases for the duration of the flight. We arrived in Canada as immigrants on paper, but in reality, we were refugees by every other respect. We were ordinary citizens forced to flee our home country because of war, violence, and persecution. Until I really delved into the research for this speech, I had never considered how lucky we actually were. I avoided physical, sexual, and mental violence. My reality, though, is not the reality for most refugees around the world. According to Alex Gray, contributor for the World Economic Forum 2016, there are 16 million refugees worldwide, 8 million of which are children, who are homeless and stateless, rejected by the countries that they come from and the countries to which they are trying to flee. As human beings, we are susceptible to fear of the unknown, and this fear often translates into prejudice against that which we don't understand or that which is different from us. But the reality is that refugees are not different from any of us. They are ordinary human beings who are facing extraordinary circumstances. They are rigorously vetted before they arrive in the US, and they make valuable contributions to society once they arrive. And at the end of the day, any one of us could become a refugee. So it is our responsibility to treat all people, regardless of their nationality, with the same compassion that we would like to receive had the tables been turned. By the conclusion of this speech, I would like you to adopt a more compassionate stance towards refugees and speak up against prejudice and hatred. To reiterate, refugees are regular people. There's a long-standing belief that they're actually criminals or terrorists, but studies show that that is not the case. There are actually lower crime rates in cities where there are more immigrants. Wadsworth in his 2010 study concluded that growth in immigration may have been responsible for part of the decline in crime during the 1990s. Another common misconception is that the US will let anyone in, and that is also not true. As you can see from this chart, there are 6 separate steps that refugees have to go through before they finally arrive in the US. So they have to first get their registration and data collection, go through an initial security check, the Department of Homeland Security interview, the biometric security check, which cross-references fingerprints with databases across the world, the cultural orientation and medical check, and finally assignment to domestic resettlement location and travel. And then they arrive, and the process doesn't even end there. This whole refugee processing and screening system generally takes between 18 and 24 months from the initial application to arrival in the US. So as you can see, it is an intensive process that involves many domestic agencies and US departments of government, as well as international and non-governmental organizations. So moving on, refugees, like I said, are regular people, and just like native-born citizens, they make valuable contributions to society. You might be thinking, well, many refugees never fully integrate into society, so what can they have to offer? And aren't they just an economic burden at that point? I want you to imagine being dropped into a foreign country, not knowing the language, being skilled but otherwise unable to find employment because of the language barrier, having to rely on welfare and public transportation, and being expected to quickly integrate into society. This is the reality for many immigrants and refugees around the world, as it was a reality for me and my family. The majority of research on immigration shows that immigration has a very positive effect on local economic growth. In a 2012 study by Hansen, he stated that skilled migrants produce large numbers of patents in electronics, machinery, and pharmaceuticals. Furthermore, the lower wages of these unskilled migrants equate to higher profits for the business owners and lower consumer prices. So whatever assistance is received is usually paid back, especially that was the case with me and my family. My dad works as a network engineer. So basically when you call 911, he makes sure that your call is connected to somebody and that somebody will be able to help you. My uncle helps kids work through trauma as a child psychologist. My brother is a student, and I'm proud of the accomplishments and the contributions that our immigrant refugee family has given to society. And that's not just our story, it's the story of many refugees and immigrants around the world who work in various industries, who are entrepreneurs, who are scientists, who work in service industries. So basically, if we can imagine that refugees are regular people, which they are, who contribute to society, then it shouldn't be a far stretch of the imagination to see yourself as a refugee at some point. To quote the exiled Palestinian poet Mourid Barghouti, displacement is like death. One thinks that it only happens to other people. So like most refugees who find themselves displaced, my parents never imagined that war would drive them out of their home country. Our lives were completely ordinary and wonderful prior to the war. However, because of my dad's religious background and my mom's religious background, which his was Christian Orthodox and hers was Muslim, he would have had to join the Serbian military and be a sniper in the war, basically kill the Bosnian Muslims, which was my mom's side of the family. So nobody ever thinks that a similar fate could befall them or their families. Certainly my parents never did. But because of growing political unrest, depletion of natural resources, and the rise in natural disasters and their frequency and severity, it could happen to any of us, really. So we have to ask ourselves if our prejudices against immigrants and refugees are warranted and based on facts, or if they're just rooted in fear and misunderstanding. Refugees are just ordinary human beings facing extraordinary situations. They make valuable contributions to society, and any one of us could become a refugee. So to reiterate, let us not ignore our basic human responsibility, which is to treat all people, regardless of nationality, with compassion. When faced with prejudice and hatred, speak up. Nothing in this life is certain. Empires have been erected and toppled, entire civilizations wiped off the face of the earth. While we're here, let's try to make life easier for all of us to experience. Thank you.